I've seen thousands of autopsies and dead bodies in crime scenes, and never in my career have I seen anything like what this murderer did to Mary Kelly. It was the most degrading, frenzied, hateful act that is imaginable. Mary Kelly was pretty, and I think the sexual allurement really set him off. Probably the next thing he did was slit open her belly. Then he began, of course, having fun with her body. You know, dismembering, cutting off her breasts and her right leg. He took off her entire face, basically flayed her to the bone. There's no statute of limitation on homicide, and just because these cases happened 114 years ago, the victims have a right to justice. Mary Kelly has a right for the world to know who murdered her, and that is my mission, is to bring about this justice in the only way I know how, which is to identify the person who did it. I believe we owe it to society and to the victims to pursue the Ripper cases. And that takes lay people like me, because Scotland Yard, well, they've got active cases to investigate, are certainly not going to investigate a 112-year-old case for which there will be no prosecution and which would cost a lot of money. I became interested in Jack the Ripper very accidentally. I was asked if I wanted to go to Scotland Yard, and I'd never been to Scotland Yard. And one of my methods in my books is I always try to cover a branch of law enforcement that I have never exposed myself to, and Scotland Yard was one of those. So I went over and I met John Grieve. And I was told that, by the way, he's a Ripper expert. And so he offered to take me on a retrospective visit of the crime scenes.
A lot of people are surprised to discover that the 5 murders about which we know most cover only a 4-month period during the autumn of 1888. So those 5 definitely escalate in terms of the injuries inflicted up to the horrendous murder of Mary Jeanette Kelly.
Marianne Nichols, what happened to her?
She's the first of the 5 that we know most about. And she's found in the early hours of the morning. They don't notice that she's got cuts to her abdomen. In fact, they don't do any real examination of the body until they get it to the mortuary. And that's the first of the series. Where we are here is the second one, which is Annie Chapman's murder, is only 9 days after Polly Nichols. And at that stage, they link, the police link the 2 murders to each other because Annie Chapman's got severe cuts to her abdomen. She'd got part of her intestines dragged out. Annie Chapman's injuries are more severe. There is more mutilation. Okay, so this is the scene of the 2 murders on the night of the 30th of September into the 1st of October. The first one is Liz Stride, and she's found with her throat cut. 45 minutes later, you get the murder victim found here. And Catherine Eddowes, who's found here, is severely mutilated and dismembered. So the risks he's running are absolutely enormous to do 2 on one night. The first thing about Mary Jeanette Kelly is she's murdered in her own home. You know, the place where you should be safest is where she's murdered. And her body literally festooned around the room. The other thing about this is this very early days of crime scene photography, so we have some crime scene photographs.
These poor women seemed to be screaming out for help from beyond the grave. Suddenly, this was more than research for one of my novels. This was a criminal investigation. This was my crusade. I've led not an easy life, but in many ways a very charmed life since I began my career in 1990, where within a couple of years my novel writing really took off, and pretty soon I started making a lot of money and began to have privileges that your average person would never dream of. I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I would have been about 21, almost 22 years old when I started at the newspaper, the Charlotte Observer. I'd go to every single news desk and I'd say, is there any story that you don't want to write that I could write? Dreadful stories, you know, the stamp collectors are in town, there's the World Championship backgammon tournament, they've got a new air compressor, that was my favorite. So they would throw me these dreadful stories, and I'd scurry off and I'd do them, and I was putting in 100 hours overtime a month. And so within 6 months, they made me a full-time reporter. And then very, very soon after that, they threw me into the police beat. I had absolutely no interest in the police beat. I had never been interested in crime, yet what I didn't know is that I had an entire circuit board that was inside of me that was just waiting for that to be plugged in. And the first exposure I had to that police beat was like this whole new side of me just lit up.
Hey, Corinne, I got an order for you. Overturned vehicle on Inflate with 2 traffic.
Go, girl. I don't see things the same way other people do. Someone will see something as a stereotype, and I look at it, and I'd be very moved and sometimes startled by a detail.
Patricia Cornwell. I had to say, where's the pool pass? Oh, yeah.
I wanted to go behind the tape, and I wanted to go in that refrigerator, and I wanted to go in that autopsy room. And that was forbidden, verboten. Reporters don't go there.
All right, well, we're working on this skeletal remains. We still don't have an identity.
I needed to go visit a medical examiner, and so I got an interview at the chief medical examiner's office in Richmond, and the first person I ever